So the Upshaws just wrapped up its final season back in January, and yeah, I know I'm a little late to the party here, but I just finished the show a couple of weeks ago, and there really might not be a better time to talk about the show because everybody's kind of had some time to marinate on it. It's been out for a while now, and I think we're finally like far enough away from it where we can kind of look back at the series as one complete story and judge it in its entirety. So I've been going back through specific episodes and watching a lot of behind the scenes footage, checking out interviews, and really trying to comb through everything this show was able to do and accomplish. And after sitting with that for a little while, I just genuinely cannot stop thinking about this show, man. It is just so damn good. And you know what makes that so interesting is that I feel like I don't hear enough people talking about it. Any of the reviews you see online are like from season 1. Either way, it still had good numbers, and Netflix would continue to renew it until it reached 5 production seasons, released across 7 separate parts with 60 episodes in total, which I don't know what it is with like the part thing. I don't know why shows do this. One of the only things about this show that I didn't like was the release schedule, but either way, it was given enough notice to put together a proper finale and wrap up the story how they wanted it to, and it also earned 10 Emmy nominations throughout its entire run. And yet, outside of the people I personally know who've seen it, I rarely see the Upshaws brought up in any kind of Twitter posts or YouTube videos or conversations in general about the best modern sitcoms. And I don't want to spend this entire video trying to solve why that is. Some people just don't watch Netflix a lot. A lot of Netflix shows kind of exist in their own bubble. You know, maybe there wasn't enough advertising for this. I know for me personally, if I didn't have Netflix, I feel like I probably would have never even heard of this show. But for the people that missed it, whatever the reason is, I think that those people genuinely missed out on something really special here. Because after watching all 60 episodes and learning how this show came together and watching the cast behind the scenes and seeing where every character's journey ultimately ended, I think the Upshaws has a legitimate case for being the best sitcom of the 2020s. And today I just want to talk about the show in its entirety. And you know, for those people that haven't seen it, there will be spoilers from this point forward, so if you don't want to see anything like that, don't want anything spoiled, go check out the actual show. And for everybody else, let's just get right into it. So according to interviews and production history from my research, the story of the Upshaws really began with Mike Epps. Mike wanted to make what he described to Wanda Sykes as a Norman Lear type production. The show centered around an ordinary working class black family in the Midwest, a family that wasn't rich but wasn't living in poverty either, just under their own very specific circumstances.
Mike Epps, you know, he wanted to meet with me and he said, look, I want to do a sitcom about a black working class family in the Midwest. And when he said it, it sounded so like throwback. And then I said, well, wait a minute, where's that family? Like we don't see that anymore. It's like those type of shows just disappeared. We just, you know, just kept talking about it. And I was like, well, you're from Indianapolis. Let's set it there. You know that place. Because that was the key thing for me, is not just to be funny, but to be authentic.
And that was the type of family that they wanted to represent. And, you know, I really thought that they knocked that out of the park. Just a large, complicated, modern black family. And when I say complicated, I mean very complicated. Bennie and Regina have their children together, but Bennie also has another son with another woman. Bernard is Bennie and Regina's oldest son, but Bennie was largely absent during his entire childhood. And then, you know, you got Lucretia over here, and she's just heavily involved in everybody's business, whether it's financially, emotionally, whatever. She just spent years helping Regina hold that family together. And there are just a lot of moving parts here. And Mike Epps bringing his Indianapolis perspective into the show is a huge part of what makes the setting feel fresh, at least in my opinion. Now, the show was actually filmed in California because, of course, but creatively, Indianapolis is baked into the entire personality of the show. Bennie owns this neighborhood garage that Lucretia helped him buy years ago, and the family, they're just kind of regular people for the most part. So Netflix officially ordered this multi-camera series in August 2019. Wanda Sykes and veteran television writer Regina Hicks are the credited co co-creators and showrunners, with Mike Epps serving as star and executive producer. The legendary Kim Fields joined the series in 2020, and then the larger family cast came together after that, and the Upshaws officially premiered in May 12th of 2021. One of my favorite things about the Upshaws is that it is unapologetically a traditional sitcom. It has the multicam presentation, the live studio audience, the recurring sets, and the ensemble cast that's just hilarious. It speaks the same basic language as all the great classics, right? All of these old school sitcoms have this exact style, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And in the 2020s, I feel like that style is not very prevalent, and it's one of the things that makes this show really stand out. A lot of the mainstream sitcoms receiving attention today are single cam comedies or workplace or mockumentaries, you know, very much like The Office archetypes, right? And I'm not saying that those shows are bad at all. You know, shows like Abbott Elementary, I love that show. It's clearly one of the best sitcoms of this era, but Abbott Elementary is using a completely different visual and comedic language. The Upshaws is trying to be a traditional family sitcom in the most recognizable old school sense of the style, but it still never feels like it's trapped in old tropes or anything like that, right? This is where I have to give Netflix a lot of credit for the breathing room that they allowed this show to have, because the Upshaws is rated TV-MA. These characters use every cuss word in the book. They openly talk about things that you just wouldn't hear on a normal sitcom, in my opinion. And I think all the profanity and things like that, they're not just funny for the sake of being funny. It works because it makes the family feel less filtered. You know, think about all these classic sitcom families we've watched over the years, and, you know, ask yourself, do we really believe none of these people ever cussed inside of their own home? Of course they were. They just didn't want to show that on TV. And because The Upshaws was made for Netflix, it could keep the structure of a classic family sitcom while letting its adults sound like actual adults. A lot of streaming comedies use their extra freedom to be a little bit more cinematic, or maybe add a little bit more drama to the story, but the Upshaws use that freedom to make the traditional sitcom feel a little bit more authentic. And I think a lot of modern shows behave as though they have to break the traditional sitcom mold to make something relevant. Sometimes that formula just needs a couple new ingredients to it, and those ingredients would not have worked nearly as well without the cast that they put together. And speaking of the cast, this cast is ridiculous and star-studded. Mike Epps as Bennie, Kim Fields as Regina, Wanda Sykes as Lucretia. This alone is an insane big three to build a sitcom around. But the newer faces were great too. Jarmel Simon playing Bernard, I thought he was one of the standout actors of this series, along with, you know, Kylie Spraggins, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, as Aaliyah. I thought she was great. Diamond Lyons as Kelvin, very, very good, especially as teenage actors. I thought they really did well in their spots. And Journey Christine as Maya, you know, she was really young in this show, and I think she deserves a lot of credit for being as good of an actor as she was at such a young age. I mean, it was pretty impressive, honestly. Most kid actors are really like stiff and awkward, but I thought she really leaned into the role and nailed it. And Gabrielle Dennis as Tasha, you know, I loved her in this role. Tasha could have easily become a one-note baby mama kind of character, but instead she has her own personality and her own growth through the series and her own importance. In my opinion, I feel like she brought a little bit of that Tashina Arnold energy, if you know what I mean. Obviously not imitating her, but I don't know, she was just kind of giving off those Tashina Arnold vibes to me. I don't know. I thought she was great in this role, and that is one of the biggest strengths of this entire series, is that everybody feels important, and even when a character is not at the center of the episode, they still feel connected to the ongoing evolution of the family in most ways. Kim Fields repeatedly described this show as lightning in a bottle, and after watching the behind the scenes footage and hearing the cast talk about each other, I completely understand what she meant. Anybody can start with a great premise, they can have talented writers, they can put together a cast full of individually funny people, but you cannot manufacture the type of chemistry that a cast like this has. Their chemistry allowed the series to go from extremely funny to genuinely emotional without either side feeling unnatural or anything like that. If you were watching the early advertising or anything like that, the trailers for the show, you could easily assume Bennie was the central character. But in my opinion, Kim Fields as Regina is the real emotional anchor of the show. To me, the story is largely experienced through her perspective, because she is the person who has spent years keeping this family functioning and raised the children and managed the finances and cleaned up all of Benny's mistakes, and frankly, she spent a significant portion of her life raising Benny too. I mean, at the beginning of this series, Regina's life just feels like it's been placed on hold. She has her own dreams and ambitions, but there's always something else that needs to be fixed, whether it's something with the kids, or it's another bill, or it's another family crisis. But what I love is that Regina's eventual career progression in the show never feels random in any way, right? She leaves her original workplace and then later takes on a role connected to the hospital, and then begins thinking about ways that she can fix the hospital and serve people better. And that desire to improve the community gradually moves her towards public services, and by the end of the series, she ends up as a politician. And the writers do a great job of laying the groundwork across the entire series for this, because as the family becomes more stable, as Benny grows as a person and a father, and as the people around Regina begin carrying more of the load, she finally gains enough room to ask herself what she wants to do. And I'm sure you've heard of this old saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Regina begins the show functioning like the entire village by herself. Well, except for Lucretia, pretty much. Lucretia's helping her a lot, but by the end, the Upshaw family has finally become a village around Regina. And because she no longer has to hold everything up by herself, she can finally chase the life that she wants and deserves. And one of the biggest reasons she finally gets that opportunity is because Benny slowly becomes somebody she can depend on. Now, Benny is a character that does not spend enough time thinking about how his actions affect the people around him. He loves his family, and nobody ever really doubts that, but loving your family and consistently making decisions in their best interest are not the same thing. Benny has a really bad habit of choosing whatever benefits Benny in that moment and then expecting everybody else to kind of just absorb the consequences. He lies, he takes shortcuts, he makes impulsive decisions. He had Kelvin when he cheated on Regina with Tasha. He was absent during most, if not all, of Bernard's childhood. And his relationship with Lucretia is largely built around the fact that she doesn't want him to ruin Regina's life. She helped Benny finance his garage, and she spent years supporting Regina and the children. In many ways, Lucretia has been the consistent partner Regina needed whenever Benny failed to be one. And yet, this is what makes Benny such a strong character, because Mike Epps plays this character in a way that genuinely infuriates you when you're watching him at times. He's a hilarious character, but there are those moments where you want to jump through the screen and choke him out like Bart Simpson. But Mike also gives him enough charm and vulnerability in certain moments, and those are the moments that make you understand why nobody's completely given up on him yet. So his character journey is not about becoming a totally different person by the end of the show. It is learning that being the head of a family means making decisions for more people than yourself. And the garage becomes a physical representation of that struggle. It's a symbol of his pride, his livelihood, his dreams, and also his failures and shortcomings. And for most of the series, he's constantly fighting to keep the shop open. And then the finale puts Benny through one last test.
Apparently, they've recovered some of the money Lucretia's accountant stole from her. More than enough to save your garage. All we gotta do is go down there, flash a couple of fake IDs, and walk out with the money.
Where the writers pull off a great fake out, where we're led to believe that Benny has once again made the worst possible decision. Just for a moment, it seemed like we kind of lost everything, and I thought we were going to get a bad ending to this series. And I'm not saying I would have hated that, but it definitely wouldn't have been a feel-good ending. But we eventually learned that we're seeing Benny imagining the consequences of stealing this money from Lucretia and Frank.
Oh my God!
I ain't getting no younger. Are you in or not?
Nope, mama can't do it. Not the same guy. You got to go.
And when the real choice comes, he does the right thing. He gives Lucretia and Frank the money. And it's one of the reasons that I love the finale and it works so well, because they're not posing the question of what's going to happen to Benny. I think the question is, who has Benny become?
What if we borrow against the house? Take out just enough to pay off the loan so you can keep the shop.
We're not doing that.
It's not right. Selling the garage, come on. You've worked too hard. You've been doing good.
We'll start something new. We'll be fine. I'm Bennie Upshaw, baby.
Yeah, you are. You are Bennie fucking Upshaw.
We all know that the old Benny would have justified stealing that money, but the Benny we see at the end of the show understands that doing this would implode his entire family. And by that point, he has too much respect for Lucretia and too much respect for Frank and too much understanding of everything those people have sacrificed for him. And we see that he is finally thinking like a member of the family instead of a man who simply happens to be in it. And while Benny's story is about becoming less selfish, Lucretia's journey almost moves in the complete opposite direction, because Lucretia begins the series with almost everything that most people want, right? She's got money, she owns properties, she's very successful and rich, and she often refers to herself as a mogul.
Ain't you supposed to be some kind of mongrel?
You know damn well the word is mogul.
Her problems are vulnerability. Her family is the center of her life. Even when she disguises that love through insults, she is just always investing in Benny's family because Regina and those children mean everything to her. I mean, she doesn't have any children of her own and she's not married, right? She's basically all in on Regina's life. And that is part of the problem with her character. She spent so much time helping everybody else survive that she just hasn't put any effort into her own personal life outside of business. And then Frank enters the picture. You know, he is somebody that she had a relationship with in the past, and his return forces Lucretia to seriously consider committing to someone outside of her own family.
I mean, I can't be with you and have Regina all in my head. You know what, maybe I should call and just clear the air.
30 years and nothing's changed.
But she's my sister.
And that's why you let her take advantage? Maybe Regina does as much for you as you do for her. I want you and your sister to be cool. But have you ever taken one day just for yourself? What does Lucretia want today?
And over time, that relationship kind of softens her up to that. You know, she never stops being her character by any means. She's always Lucretia. She's just a little bit more willing to let people solve their own problems. And her true growth in the show is just about allowing herself to prioritize herself. And she ultimately commits to Frank, and at the end of the show, they go on a worldwide cruise together. And that's kind of the bookmark on her story right now. But Bernard's story takes that idea of allowing yourself to live in an entirely different direction. Bernard may have the most layered individual journey in the show, even though he becomes less prominent in the final couple of parts. When we meet him, his relationship with Benny is almost entirely built on rage. The only time they see each other is when he's delivering packages to Benny's garage. And of course, that anger is completely justified. Benny was not there for Bernard when he needed him, and the only people Bernard truly trusts are Regina and Lucretia. And in my interpretation, his difficulty trusting other people is directly connected to that abandonment. So Bernard is very defensive and keeps people at a distance because distance gives him all the control. He also struggles to fully accept who he is, and he's really afraid of people judging him for being gay and stuff like that. But what makes Bernard's story so satisfying is that the show they don't treat his sexuality like the one issue in his life. He gradually becomes more comfortable with himself, and he repairs his relationships, and him and Benny slowly begin to understand one another. And after he comes out to Benny, the writers allow him to continue with his life. You know, his character does not just become permanently frozen around that issue of acceptance.
When is something ever gonna be your problem, huh? Send your friend to jail, his problem. Steal mom's money, her problem. Now you'll react, my problem.
React to what?
You got a gay son.
Kelvin?
I'm gay.
So that's why your uniform's always tight. Man, I wish you hadn't have told me. Yeah, I should have stomped you out, that little cheap punch you threw. But I can't hit you now, because it's a hate crime. Damn, dude, laugh. I'm funny. That's supposed to be funny.
Wait, so you cool?
I'm cool. What kind of father you think I am? I don't care who you with. I still love you, son.
Once we see Bernard find that peace with himself, he starts pursuing larger goals. He tries to open his own gym, and it ultimately fails, but I like that the writers wrote it that way, because obviously I don't want Bernard to fail, but not everybody that follows a dream is instantly successful. Sometimes you take the risk and put in the effort and it just doesn't work out. And the important part is that Bernard just becomes someone that's just willing to give it a shot and not be afraid to fail. The only real weak point with Bernard's character to me is that they basically introduced that he has a daughter that he didn't know about, and he just willingly accepts this knowledge without any kind of DNA test or anything like that. It was one of the most stupid things that I've seen in the show, to be honest, and probably the only bad writing decision that I could think of, just because just his daughter's character in general is not a big part of the show at all. And like, as I was writing the script, I completely forgot about her even being a part of the show, you know what I mean? So it just felt like that was probably the only wasted storyline in the entire show. But while Bernard grew up dealing with an absent father, Kelvin enters the series at an age where Bennie still has an opportunity to do better. Kelvin is Bennie's other son with Tasha, and his journey is another example of the family gradually becoming a village, because when we first meet Kelvin, he does not have enough structure at all. You know, in the opening episode, he's 13 years old and he's out there shooting dice with older guys and making beer runs for them. Even Bennie is disturbed when he finds out that this is happening, and it becomes very clear to him this kid does not have enough guidance or direction.
Hey Kelvin, run out and grab me a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of Crown and keep the change.
What about, hold up, nigga, how you gonna send my kids down to the liquor store to get a bottle of Crown and some cigarettes? The boy is 13.
Relax, it's my store. They ain't gonna card him.
All right. I got weed brownies on the left and regular brownies on the right.
Damn. Shit ain't right.
But over time, he receives more guidance through Bennie and stronger male figures, and being around an increasingly stable family structure, he slowly finds adults willing to invest in him, and that stability changes his path entirely. Aaliyah, on the other hand, also begins the series with storylines that sometimes feel like a separate teen sitcom running beside the adult show. Aaliyah and Kelvin going to high school together gave the early seasons a more traditional family sitcom balance, and you had Maya to kind of be the younger child, right? But in the later portions of the series, the show starts placing a lot less emphasis on these younger characters, and the adult relationships kind of dominate almost everything. And there's no official explanation why, but my personal theory is that because this was a TV MA series filled with all the adult language and subject matter and whatnot, I think viewers that were the same age as Aaliyah and Kelvin and Maya probably were not a part of your core audience for this show, and it's possible that the creative team recognized that the adult ensemble was the primary attraction and just decided to put their efforts into that. And you know, I want to be clear again, there's no concrete evidence about that. It's just my interpretation of what probably happened. And you know, even though I understand that the show leaned that way for a few different reasons, I think that something was still lost when the younger storylines became less important, because that early balance made the family dynamic feel a lot wider in scope. But still, the earlier work with these characters helps create a strong sense of connection towards them. And even beyond the core family, this show had a great cast of side characters and recurring characters that just made the world feel very vibrant. The moment they walk into a scene, they are scene stealers. And for the Upshaws, 3 of those characters that I want to shout out specifically were Tony, Duck, and Sheila. Mike Esteem, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, I'm real sorry, but he plays the character Tony, that is one of Bennie's best friends and employees at the garage, and Tony is freaking hilarious, man.
Girl just brought in the car, check out her headlights.
Man, I'm busy. Let Duck handle it.
I was trying to be classy, man. She got big titties.
Every time this man appears, he's given something hilarious to the scene, whether it's his weird and like oddball reactions or timing or delivery. He never needs much screen time to make a huge impact. And you know, then there's Duck, played by Paige Kennedy, and Duck is probably my favorite recurring character in the series. He is also Bennie's friend and a former inmate who gets out of prison early in the show. It's in the pilot episode, and starts working at the garage with everybody.
Damn, Duck, shouldn't we be working out in the gym?
You think I had a big fancy gym when I was on the inside?
This whole place is an obstacle course. Let's get it.
Oh, come on, Duck, what the hell?
Come on, man. These my workout shorts. All right, man, I hope you're stretched.
Why do you have a shank?
Laps.
He's a character that's lived a rough life, but now he's trying to filter everything through his Christian faith, and Paige Kennedy does a great job with this character. You know, he has so much energy and just charisma, and And his presence becomes substantially smaller as the series continues, and he eventually does just leave the cast entirely. I searched for a reason why he left the show or why he was written out of the show, but I couldn't really find anything official on that. Maybe he was just ready to move on to something else after that period of time. And I guess until somebody involved in the show kind of brings that up or talks about it, all we can do is kind of guess. All I can say for sure is that Duck was deeply missed in those later seasons. The show was still awesome and all that, but he occupied a space that I don't think anybody else was able to replace. And then there's Sheila, Regina's original boss of the show, played by Dana Dooley, and she is unbelievably hilarious, man. That goofy smile she always has, and the way that her delivery.
Billy? No. I'm sorry, Regina Upshaw no longer works here.
The way that I quit was unprofessional.
Well, it takes a big woman to admit she was insane. Part of why I came is I may have a job opportunity for you.
At Mercy General?
No, that ship has sailed. It's a chief administrator position. As soon as I heard about it, I thought of you.
I don't even know where the inspiration came for that character, but it is hilarious, man. I loved Sheila's character so much, and I wish she could have been a part of the show more. After Regina leaves her original job, she still makes a few more appearances later in the show. But it's characters like these that help create such a dynamic world, and that's not even mentioning like Glodine or Davis or whatever. Like, these are all great characters, and because these characters were coming in and out and constantly evolving and changing, the show never felt like it was stuck repeating the same situations, which I'm a huge fan of. This show was extremely well paced. I mean, I never felt trapped in one storyline or one conflict or one season for way too long. It wasn't like the writers just found one successful situation and then tried to repeat it until there was nothing left. The show was always moving and changing, but it also never moved so quickly that the important relationships resolved before we had time to invest in them. I mean, they just really timed everything perfectly with that. And overall, the place where these characters begin in season 1 is miles away from where they are at the end. And, that's emotionally, mentally, in terms of their relationships and what they want from life. Each stage lasts long enough for us to become invested before the show naturally moves into the next one. Regina's professional ambitions develop over time. Benny's relationship with Regina, Bernard, Kelvin, Lucretia, they all develop. Lucretia and Frank take a little bit of time to get their stuff going, and the family's financial problems do not disappear because they luck out in some way. The garage remains unstable for most of the series, and by the end, Benny ends up losing it, which I thought was really symbolic because the shop represented who the old Benny was to me, and losing that allowed him to have a new beginning. And that new beginning only matters because the series was patient enough to let the garage mean something first. I mean, you had 5 seasons of being with the garage, so when he loses it in the end, it really does weigh heavy on you as a viewer. And one of the easiest mistakes that I think a serialized sitcom can make is exhausting all of its major conflicts too early. Once everybody's forgiven everybody or achieved every dream or resolved every relationship, the writers got to start manufacturing like new problems to keep the show alive. And that always reminds me of a show like Alf that shot off all its ammo in the first 2 seasons, and in the last 2 seasons they were struggling with their creative decisions, right? Because they didn't leave a lot to work with. They weren't patient enough. But the Upshaws were patient all the way through, and it allowed relationships to improve. It allowed characters to achieve things, and that's why the show remains comforting without being static. Most traditional sitcoms ask you to spend time with the same characters every week, and the Upshaw asks you to grow with them. This is not the story of one person becoming better. It's a story of a family becoming one cohesive unit. By the end, nobody's life is perfect by any means, but they're all in a great place, and I think they're all better equipped to face hardships together when those things happen. So I mean, in conclusion here, all in all, when I started thinking about this video originally, it was all centered around the idea that The Upshaws was one of the best sitcoms of the 2020s, and I still believe that to be the case after all my research. And in an era dominated by single cam comedies and mockumentaries and and shows that appear to be embarrassed to embrace the traditional sitcom format, the Upshaws unapologetically committed to that and did not simply imitate the past. They modernized the language, they modernized the family structure. It represented something fresh and universal. It gave every major character an individual journey. It built one of the deepest supporting casts I've ever seen in a sitcom, and it understood when to let situations breathe and when it was time for the story to move forward. And most importantly, it never lost the warmth or comfort or laughter that make people return to a great sitcom over and over again. That is what made the Upshaws so special. And now that the story is finished, I don't think the conversation should stop at whether this is the best sitcom of the 2020s. I think we might be selling it short there. I genuinely believe that the Upshaws is actually one of the greatest sitcoms of all time.
And I learned that life imitates art. And when you put out good work, that's a mirror to and a reflection of human beings' lives. You help people live, you help people grow. This is an engine, and without one bolt, the engine can't ride.
You witnessed lightning in a bottle tonight, and every time that you watch us on Netflix, lightning in a motherfucking bottle.